This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News. And in this pre-West Surrey Council election, I'm with the Liberal Democrat candidate, George Potter, who's standing in Guildford East. George, thank you very much for joining the Guildford Dragon for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Um, Now, what's your expectation for the overall result in West Surrey?
At the moment, all the signs are pointing to it being very close, very touch and go as to who will be running the new council. Either the Liberal Democrats on the one hand, or a Conservative and Reform coalition on the other hand. Everything we're seeing from across West Surrey is pointing to, while it's difficult to judge exactly who's going to win in what places when it comes to Reform and Conservatives, it's likely to be sort of a fairly neck and neck race for control of the council. And that's why we're obviously working incredibly hard across the entire count and across the entire area to make sure that people have a strong Liberal Democrat alternative to more of the same from the Conservatives.
Okay, no, that's interesting because I looked up just a couple of hours ago. Uh, what's it called? Britain Votes, I think. Anyway, a polling organ, Britain Votes Now, and they're predicting the Lib Dems to win 21 of the seats in West Surrey. You don't agree with that?
I don't think, no. I mean, I've also seen a different projection site, poll check, saying we're headed for 47 seats. But the thing is that none of these are local polling. All of them are people taking national polls and
Right.
trying to project them onto local elections, as I think, as we both know full well. Whilst national politics do play a part in how people vote locally, that it is far from the only thing, and the local factors are not the sort of thing that show up in national polls. And I have to say that on the doorstep, what has struck me is just how many people are aware of the massive debt burden the new council is going to be inheriting from Woking, from Spelthorne, as a result of
Okay,
profligacy by
we will
Conservative
get on to that
administrations.
particular
Yeah,
subject,
yeah.
but what
And
you're
it, and
saying
it's,
is
the point
people
is,
are
it's
aware
it
of local
they're
issues.
aware of it, and it's influencing how they will be voting in these elections.
Okay. But another factor in this, isn't it, that the Lib Dem party is not that united at the moment. I mean, you have a history of falling out with yourself. What's going on? I've noticed on your own campaign leaflet, there's no sign of Julia McShane, and there is in one of the photographs, Catherine Houston is featured, and both you and Catherine were sacked from the executive by Julia McShane. Isn't the party fractured locally?
No, I don't recognise that at all. I mean, it is this is a campaign for the West Surrey Council election. Julia is the leader of Guildford Borough Council, but we are not running a Guildford Borough election campaign. If we're running a Guildford Borough election campaign, I absolutely would be appearing on Julia in all my leaflets because she's our council leader. I think she's doing a great job. Obviously, we might not see eye to eye on absolutely everything, but at the end of the day, what we're focused on is that we desperately need a fresh start for West Surrey with a new council. We are running part of a united West Surrey campaign. We've working hand in glove across the entire area that will make up West Surrey to make sure that we're putting forward a positive, competent administration to run the new council and to give people a chance to vote for that. We've got the same manifesto, whether you're in Runnymede or whether you're in Waverley or whether you're in Guildford. We've got the same priorities, we've got the same approach. If you go looking on social media, you'll see plenty of photos of all of us as candidates standing together in photos. But obviously, in my local leaflets in Guildford East, I'll be focusing with um, using the photos that I've got to hand, just in the same way as that if you go to Shalford, you get a different bunch of photos, or if you go
Okay,
to Ash, you get a
okay.
different
So
bunch of
you're saying
photos.
it's all hearts and flowers. So can you guarantee you won't be standing against Julia McShane in the Lib Dem elections in May, in the group elections?
Yes, I think I can very much guarantee that, but I don't really see what relevance a GBC matter has, in any event, has
Well,
to do with with the West Surrey election.
it has relevance in as much as are the Lib Dems a united group or not? But you're saying that you are, and you're not going to stand in the
I mean,
May.
all I would say is if you look at the county council, where we are the official opposition, and where Julia and I and many other Lib Dem councillors all sit together, you will see we have a very clear united behind our county leadership and Paul Follows. We've got a clear shadow cabinet of portfolio holders, myself included, and we're all very much singing from the same hymn sheet in that whilst in any democratic party, which we are, you will obviously have the occasional disagreement on the nuances of issues. Fundamentally, what we're all united about is delivering sound finances and good public services for residents.
Okay, now
That is the thing we all have in common.
time's against us, George, so we have
Yeah.
to rattle through this.
Mm.
I'm sure you'll appreciate that. First of all, I want to get on to planning. Now, on your leaflets, you say you're going to safeguard our green spaces and the environment. But isn't the truth that your party has done nothing to prevent the development of the green belt in the borough? You've pretty much caved in without a whimper. Obviously, planning control and housing targets have been taken out of your hands, all the local councils' hands largely. But where has been the vocal objection to the policy, both locally and at Westminster? Isn't the truth that the Lib Dems quietly agree with the development plans at the
No,
moment?
that's not. No, that's not remotely true, Martin. And I don't think that's remotely backed up by the evidence. The fact is that we, as Liberal Democrats in Guildford, have been pushing ahead as quickly as possible, as quickly as the government will let us, with updating the local plan so that we can protect our green belt. If you look at our record at running Guildford Council, we've been resolute in saying, in taking enforcement action against when there is unlawful development in the green belt. Our councillors have been robust in scrutinising and challenging inappropriate development. Again, I will point out the fact that GBC under our leadership put a huge amount of time and effort into resisting a planning appeal by Taylor Wimpey for Wisley Airfield, precisely because we felt that they had put forward a planning application which didn't comply with local plan policies. We were overruled by the planning inspector, but we have absolutely put up a fight. And if you look at the national level, our own local MP for Guildford, Zoe Franklin, has been speaking in Parliament just this week about the need for the government's approach to focus on brownfield first development and to speak out against and challenge the way in which increasingly arbitrary housing targets are being imposed upon councils, with decision making at a local level being increasingly taken out of local hands, and yet the fundamental problems which are holding up development, which are not local authorities but infrastructure, roads, schools, water, electricity, all that stuff is being left by the wayside. So, we have been very clear and very vocal in our protection for ensuring the appropriate development, in providing housing which is needed, but in the right places and in the right way, and standing up for the community infrastructure. And I'd also just make the point that also protecting our natural environment, green spaces, isn't simply about house building. It is also about looking after our countryside, looking after our environment, tackling climate change, looking after wildlife, which is also all part and parcel
I think
of our
people
manifesto.
would accept that's true. But if I've spoken to people in the east of the borough and they've written to me without me suggesting it, that they've given up on you in the east of Guildford borough. They just don't think that you're standing up for them and their opposition to development plans at all.
Well, there's about 20 odd thousand people living in the east of a borough, and I very much doubt that there's been 20,000 people writing to you on this topic. I suspect
No,
I
not
could.
20,000, but I think they're representative. If you, I don't think that Liberal Democrats are well supported in those boroughs.
Well, I think you'll see otherwise when people come to vote in the local elections. But more to the point, at the end of the day, is people barring Effingham and Tillingbourne, there are no Lib Dem councillors in the eastern parts of Guildford Borough. Um, and those who voted for councillors from other parties, if they're frustrated with how well they're being served, I would suggest they need to look at how well their councillors have been doing their job at representing them. Because I can tell you that in places where people have Lib Dem councillors, they feel quite satisfied with a job the Lib Dem councillors do of standing up for them. And unfortunately, it's very easy when you're an opposition councillor to say, oh, well, I can't do anything. It's all the fault of wicked Lib Dems running the council. But that's not really true necessarily. And what I'd also say, which is far more important, is going ahead into the new West Surrey Council. What is vitally important is that we, as a new council, take a joined up strategic approach to planning across the entire area, making use of the potential we will have from having a single tier of government to do planning better, to put in better infrastructure. And and when I have spoken myself to people in the villages in the eastern parts of Borough, the main thing is not particularly the number of new houses. It's the lack of supporting infrastructure, which time and time again is a thing that people raise. And I would completely agree with them. We
Okay.
completely agree with them. That's what we're focused on fixing.
Okay, but on planning, how do you envisage the planning committees to be organised? Or I mean, I don't know if it's going to be more than one committee or a single committee in West Surrey, because how on earth would we in Guildford be able to judge on a planning issue in the north of West Surrey any more than they could judge ours?
Well, this is one of the issues of where it's one of many issues which the new council will need to figure out an approach to, because there is no clear-cut answer to it. Because as a starting point, with the best will in the world, the current planning regime nationally will mean that for at least the next 5 years, you're going to have a separate local plan for Guildford, for Waverley, for Woking, for Surrey Heath, etc. So each of the existing council areas will have a separate local plan with separate local planning policies, with separate local planning teams. So a single committee covering the entirety of West Surrey for planning decisions would not seem to be the obvious choice. Um, but on the other hand, there's also talk of the government effectively removing councillors from having a say on all but the very largest of planning applications. So a lot of this is to be determined what is going to be possible. But I will say this is also why the Lib Dems have led the way in pushing for a parish council for the town of Guildford, because so that there is definitely going to be at least one layer with a clear local remit for Guildford on planning matters. And that's also why we as a party, if we are running the council, will want to work far more closely with parishes and town councils on a wide range of issues, but particularly planning, because we
Okay,
recognise that the centralisation which is going to take place means that we need to work with those bodies which can provide a stronger local voice than a council of just 90 people for a population of 700,000.
okay, but of course, opinions very divided on the town council issue, including within your party. In fact, that's an issue that Julia McShane's is at variance with the rest of her members over, isn't it?
Well, I think it's funny, Martin, because the number of times we have seen in the Dragon a criticism. Not, I'm not going to say by yourself in the editorial, though it has popped up from time to time, but from lots of people saying, "Oh, well, the national parties, the Lib Dems, they all vote the same way. They all stick to the party line." And and here on the parish council, where there is quite clearly a variance of opinion, um, it's been sort of like, oh well, not all the Lib Dems agreed with it. This is somehow a weakness. I'd say it's a strength that we as a party can encompass differences of opinions and allow people
Okay,
to vote
all
in what
right,
they feel is in the best interest of their residents.
fair
But I
enough.
mean, but to be clear, the majority of the Lib Dem council group in Guildford support a parish council because we think it's in the best long-term interest of residents going forwards, particularly with the changes to planning. But on the other hand, and it's a fair point, as people pointed out, some people look and say, well, actually, the cost of a parish precept, is it necessarily worth it for residents in all parts of the town? And it's something where reasonable people can agree to disagree. And that's all that happened within the Lib Dem group. We agreed to
Okay,
disagree, but a
fair enough.
democratic decision was made.
Fair enough. I hear what you're saying on that. So I want to switch to finances now. Now, another promise you've made in your pamphlet is to fix the finances at West Surrey. But your track record at GBC is not good, is it? The housing maintenance contract overspend happened during the joint Lib Dem R4GV administration, and we still don't know the facts of the matter and how large the scale is of any fraud. How can you claim to be good financial managers?
Well, in a very simple way, which is that in 2023, when the Lib Dems took full control of Guildford Borough Council, and crucially took over the finance portfolios, we were the ones who recognised actually the council is heading towards bankruptcy. There is a real risk we could run out of money, and we're the ones who then, yes, we uncovered the fraud which had been going on due to
But no, no,
weaknesses for
George,
a
it
long period of
wasn't
time.
you that
But
it wasn't your party that uncovered the fraud. It was the council officers. Any
it was
any
it was it was uncovered on our watch. But the point I'm making, Martin, if you let me finish, please, is you can judge a record not in terms of what problems we came across whilst we were running the council, but in terms of how we have dealt with them. And what the way we dealt with them was to bring in outside independent experts to have a root and branch review of how the council worked, how the finances worked, and to make recommendations on what we need to do differently. And we have then not just followed and implemented those recommendations, we're the ones who said, okay, no, we're going to publish these reports. And I know you've read the reports. We publish the findings. We set up an independent assurance panel. We have been reporting back to full council every 6 months on our progress. And the proof in the pudding is that in the space of 3 years, we've gone from a council which is on the verge of bankruptcy to one which has just set a 2-year balanced budget, which has cut borrowing, which has renegotiated contracts saving residents millions of pounds a year, and which has balanced the books without having to cut public services. Now that is our record, and if the county council and if others had followed our approach of let's get in outside auditors and experts to review the way things are working, we perhaps wouldn't be dealing with quite the same level of mess that we're going to be inheriting at the West Surrey level. And the reality is that if you look in this election, we are the only party who has been pushing for transparency over the scale of the problem, and the only
Okay,
party who's
we
talking
are going to
about doing
get
anything
onto
about
that,
it.
but I just want to, I mean, it was the CEO, as I understand, at Guildford Borough Council that called these people in to fix the problem. I don't think it was the Lib Dem councillors that sorted it out. It was the officers.
Well, I think that betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of local government in that with anything the council does, it is not a councillor who gets on the phone and rings up Solace in this case and says, "Come in and do a review." But at the end of the day, the way the council works is that senior officers will discuss with the political leadership, "Here's the problem we've got. Here are a range of options for dealing with it," and then it's up to the political decision makers to decide which of these options do we want to go with. And we were very clear, and the direction we set as administration to officers was not, "Oh, let's cover this up. Let's hush it up as much as possible. Let's not play a blame game." To say, "No, there's a problem. We need to deal with it. We need to be as transparent as possible about it because people deserve to know the truth, and people deserve to be able to judge us on how well we're dealing with it." And that, I would say, more than anything else, is the set of values that we will be needing to deal with the debt at the West Surrey level.
But we
And
still don't know the truth, and the investigation into the scale of the fraud has been going on for months and months, and people have
well,
been.
unfortunately, that's in the hands of the police. And
No, no, it's not all in the hands. The scale of the fraud, that's in the hands of GBC. They're meant to be investigating what level of expenditure was not spent correctly, i.e., on bathrooms that weren't refurbished or whatever. And that's been delayed and is still ongoing.
It has not been delayed. There is a review underway at the present, and looking at specific things. But the thing which is you have to understand is that our first priority with the housing situation is, yes, if there has been fraud, it's important to understand the level of fraud and what it has cost taxpayers. But our first duty is to the 5,000 odd households who are council tenants and making sure that they are in safe and secure housing in the first place. Our first priority has been to fix and to make sure that all of our homes are safe and in a good state of repair. That has been our priority. Having dealt with that, we have then been able to say, right, let's look into the fraud. But again, it's worth bearing in mind here, we're talking about thousands of jobs which have been raised, which have been carried out, which have been signed off to ascertain what level, if any, there has been fraud or overbilling or overcharging is a very complicated, very slow process. None of us are happy with the fact that it's taking this long, but you can either rush to a conclusion quickly or you can do it thoroughly and be accurate. And we have chosen thoroughness and accuracy, and we have chosen transparency about that.
But
And
some
as we
people will
have done
say you're kicking
as
it
we have
into
done
the
all the
long
way along,
grass.
Martin, as we've done
Some
all the way
people will say
along,
you're kicking it into the long grass, George, as a party.
well, people may, political opponents may want to say that, but that's simply not the truth.
Okay.
I
All
have
right.
been myself critical of I am, as a backbencher, I am not a, supine in the face of my party leadership. I will quite happily criticise when I see something is going wrong. But the fact is, anybody who has been sat on the Overview Scrutiny Committee and looked at these papers will see that whilst there have been some frustrations around it, Nobody has been slow walking the process. It has been going as quickly as possible, and it's been done thoroughly and independently. And the whole point is of it being independent is that it is not the political leadership who are setting the timetable. It's being dictated by how long the job takes to do
Okay, but
properly.
but I mean, commitments to produce reports haven't been observed, have they? Anyway, let's move on to something else. I want to move on to roads and potholes because another of the promises in your leaflet is to fix the roads and public spaces. How are you going to do that?
The the biggest starting point is we believe we need to be getting much better value for money out of the existing highways contract. If you All councils around the country will plead poverty about fixing the road and say they don't have enough money. And there is some truth to that. But Surrey performs very poorly compared to equivalent councils in terms of what we get in terms of the state of our roads for the amount of money we spend. Um, and what we've seen over the past 5 years is the expenditure goes up, but the number of potholes fixed stays the same. And we, as the opposition of county council, have had to press and frankly battle against the political leadership and the senior staff leadership to even see the highways contract. And our view of it is that it does not represent good value for money in how it's being implemented. The county council does not properly monitor and inspect the work being carried out in its name, particularly in terms of quality, particularly in terms of value for money. And consistently, we believe that there are ways the money can be spent better to better effect. And that is sort of at the crux of it. So, for example, less temporary patching, more serious long-term repairs, more inspection to make sure we're getting value for money. I'll point to example the fact that in my own division, we have just had an underpass resurfaced under the railway line near the George Abbott School. The price tag for 2 weeks of work to resurface a single footpath included £18,000 for the hiring of a porter cabin for the work crews to use. Now, I don't dispute that the work crews need a porter cabin, but I find it hard to believe that the market rate for a porter cabin for 2 weeks is £18,000, given you can rent quite a nice house for that amount of money. That's the sort of thing where we want to get into the nuts and bolts and fix the failed highways contract, renegotiating it, or indeed bringing the service in-house if absolutely necessary, so that we can deliver value for money and improve the quality of roads and pavements.
Okay, I note that you're not saying you're going to have extra money, and that's
Hmm.
important, I think. You're saying you're going to achieve that through better management. Fair enough. And because we all know that the elephant in the room here is this debt, this legacy debt that was created by conservative councils, let's be clear about that, but now is affected by government policy on this reorganization. So how are you going to deal with it? I mean, it's out of any recognizable scale for local governments to deal with this level of debt, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tell me what you think is going to happen when you start up.
Well, I think it's important to recognise the scale of a challenge, which is, 40% of the council's budget will be spent simply on servicing the debt. That is just put that into the context of any household budget. If you're spending 40% of your income paying your credit card bills, then that speaks to the scale of a challenge you'll have, and it's going to be the same for the council. In terms of what will happen, we recognise that our first job in the first 10 months is going to be putting together a realistic budget for the new council to say what in its first year, what will its budget realistically be, and what degree of service level or provision is possible. Now, that is going to be difficult because as we have found already on the West Surrey Joint Committee, Lib Dem council have found that trying to get transparency, particularly from the county council, about the finances, about developing a joined up financial baseline, has taken a not inconsiderable amount of lobbying. But come the 7th of May, if we are running the council, we'll be able to start seeing the figures, getting them lined up. But the crucial thing is we need to be able to demonstrate to central government that we have left no stone unturned in terms of finding value for money, in terms of making realistic and achievable economies that aren't just simply false savings. And we then need to go back to government and say, if you go ahead with creating this council with this debt on the 1st of April, it will be bankrupt from day one. And the government is not lawfully allowed to create a council that would be bankrupt at from day one, and there will have to be a bit of hardball fundamentally and hard-headed negotiation about getting a government bailout for some of the debt.
Negotiation or legal challenge? Because you mentioned the law there.
We will have to look at all the options. Yeah, and the reality is, we cannot at this stage say definitively what will happen. But it's worth noting that our Lib Dem MPs in Surrey have already been raising throughout the reorganisation process the issue of the debt and the need for bailout. Now, the government has given assurances that there will be further support, but further support is a very nebulous concept. What we need is a clear financial commitment. But beyond that, we're also very clear that above all, the most important thing is that the new administration needs to take the debt seriously, not to be going into this election making any frivolous spending promises like some of our opponents are, not burying our heads in the sand over the scale of the problem, but saying, no, this is a crisis. We need to deal with it from day one. And that is what we will be doing. And that ultimately is the best chance we have of negotiating with central government to get a better deal. And I think the only other thing I'd mention is another issue that is still yet to be determined is the exact allocation of liabilities and assets between West and East when it comes to the county council. And I personally think there's no argument to be made of given that all the debt is being dumped in the West pretty much, why should the assets be split 50-50 between East and West when the West is going to be in a far worse financial position? I'm not suggesting we should be taking over, say, council depots used to provide services in East Surrey, but if there are commercial assets worth money, why should East Surrey necessarily get a completely even split of it when West Surrey is being hit with a far higher debt burden? But all of this is the sort of stuff which will have to be determined after the election when we have a
and I'm
mandate to
sure
do
a lot of
things.
people will sympathise with that view. But coming back to Guildford, what's to stop West Surrey Council saying we've got all this debt, we can't afford not to sell the assets we've got? Guildford House, for instance, it costs us money to run. We can get whatever it is, the market rate for it, be a couple of £1 million, let's say. Let's not flog it off. Don't you think that's going to happen?
Well, this is very much the sort of a very real risk of what could happen if we don't deal with the debt. If the new council, because the worst case scenario here is we don't deal with the debt, we go into bankruptcy within the first couple of years, and then central government commissioners are sent in to take over, and they will sell off absolutely everything that isn't nailed down, because that will be their only mandate to cut the council's costs however possible. That is why we need to prevent that from happening. But that's also why, we have been why we have been clear about one of the benefits of having parish and town councils is it enables asset transfers. It means that instead of simply having to say, this costs us money, so let's sell it off to the highest bidder, we can say, well, actually, this costs us money. If a parish council is willing to take it over, if a voluntary or community group is willing to take it over, we'll give it to them.
But you've left it too late for that, haven't you? Because the whether Guildford has a town council or not is no longer within the borough council's gift.
Well, yes, I mean that again. That is not us leaving it late. We were very clear that we want to get it done before the deadline, and then the government moved the deadline up forwards by a couple of weeks, and we missed out.
Okay.
But I'll be very clear: the Lib Dems, as a group, as a administration in waiting for West Surrey, are very clear that we support devolution to town and parish councils. We are supportive of their existence. We support their creation where people want them. And so, we are very clear that the new West Surrey cabinet, if it's run by the Lib Dems, will not be blocking a town council for Guildford. So, and if Gorn goes ahead, and if residents in Guildford, and if the town council want to take assets on from the new West Surrey council, the door will be open. And the same goes for all the other parishes across the Guildford Borough area. We are very clear that we want to work collaboratively. What we do not want is one giant, remote, unaccountable, centralised West Surrey Council. We want things devolved to be as local as possible and as responsive to residents as possible and in the hands of communities as much as possible. That has always been the Lib Dem ethos, and that is what we'll be continuing on the new council.
Okay.
And to my mind, that is the best way we can protect those assets for the future of Guildford.
Councillor George Potter, Thank you very much. Our 30 minutes is up, but thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, Martin.